It is cold outside. Well, hang in there, because did you know that in just 6 more days, the days actually start getting longer? That's right. We almost made it, folks. So hang in there, and days going to get a little more sunlight. Is going to take time, but December 21st is around the corner. That's the magic date I look forward to every year. All right, I want to bring in our next guest, Amy Friesen. I've known Amy for quite a few years now, as we are in similar industries, caring for seniors and their families, and I regard Amy as a dear friend and colleague. She's based in Ottawa, and as a best-selling author and expert in the senior living industry, Amy has worked with seniors and their families throughout the world. Amy founded Tea and Toast in 2014 to help seniors and their families gain access to better choices and reduce the stress and feeling of being overwhelmed. She's the author of Breadcrumbs, From Home Care to Care Homes, a family's guide through the Eldercare journey. It was only released a couple of months ago, and it has already reached bestseller status. Amy, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thanks, Matt. Talk about being cold. I'm still rocking out over here to Tina Turner trying to get warm.
Yes, I think we needed a little of that toe-tapping music and Proud Murray with Tina Turner. Amy, finally got you on the show, taking here on a Sunday. I know you're extremely busy. Wonderful book, by the way, called Breadcrumbs. And can you discuss some of the challenges the industry's facing and how they're impacting caregivers and families?
I would tell you, thanks so much first, Matt, for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I would tell you, our system's in a bit of a mess for seniors and families. Let me say, the basic challenges families are up against is trying to compile all of the information, and not even just that information, but the changing information and how it impacts the other information on top of that information. It's wild out there, and families get really confused really quickly. I mean, we're professionals in this industry, and we even get confused, and we figure it out. But consider that all those families that just don't have that background. And so, things that really add to that are the silos between public and private systems, and trying to figure that out, and trying to figure out which information goes where and how to use it. And then also, long-term care waiting lists, right? There's so many challenges around that, getting in, when do I apply, how ill or how much services do I need to get into there? There's just so much. And then not to mention, the government constantly just changing directions of healthcare in our province, but across, our country. And with that, changing acronyms every 4 minutes, right? And families just trying to keep up. And I think it all comes down to trying to keep on top of all that education, so they can make educated decisions for themselves and their loved ones. It's
amazing what you're saying, because we are in the middle of it, and even ourselves, so many moving parts, and it's changing. Just quickly, you talked about long-term care, Amy. We're both part of an organization called Eldercare Planners of Canada. You're a founding member of that, doing a great job. But we're very fortunate. Once a month, we all get together, coast to coast, and we talk about the healthcare system. And, here in Quebec, Amy, and for those regular listeners of Life Unrehearsed, always talking about the challenges we have in our healthcare system. Long-term care, you can wait 1, 2, even 3 years. And you were on our conference call the other day, and you were saying, how many years did you hear for one particular client that they wanted to get into an Ontario nursing home?
Oh, our list here can go up to like 8 years. Somewhere around there. It's crazy.
Can you imagine? And obviously, I mean, that's an exception. But here we are in Quebec, where we think it's not a good situation, because it isn't. But sometimes the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. Now, Amy, you and I both have to deal with a lot of the sandwich generation, adult children. We're dealing with seniors. We're even dealing with grandkids. How do generational differences influence decisions in elder care?
I think that, a lot of right now what's happening is a lot of the baby boomers obviously are moving through, which means that millennials are making or helping to make a lot of decisions, right? And I'm a millennial. I'm one of the older millennials. But, we come about it differently, where, our parents may not discuss things because it was faux pas, or they just didn't talk about that stuff with their parents, like money, for instance. The next generations, including generations after mine, are wanting to discuss it, and they wanted to get it done, and they want to get it out there, and they want to problem solve it. And I think going forward, as the next generation start to come into this housing and the elder care in general, I think that decisions are going to be made hopefully much quicker, but much more educated wise, because we're doing a lot more research on the internet or talking to professionals. But right now, it's tough sometimes to get that information into the seniors of today's hands, because a lot of them are shut down because of different things that they've learned throughout the years and ways that they've been taught to disclose or not disclose information.
Listening to Life Unrehearsed, Matt Delvecchio here, and I'm talking with Amy Friesen, author of Breadcrumbs, From Home Care to Care Homes, a family's guide through the elder care journey. Now, Amy, what strategies can families use to balance shifting roles in caregiving? As we know, about 1 in 4 Canadians are in a role of caregiving. Most of them not trained, just thrown into that role, and it's so crucial. So how do we balance the shifting roles of caregiving?
And with the shifting role as well, remember there's also the reverse of role, right? You come to a point where you're being parented as a child, and all of a sudden you're in a similar role of parenting them. I don't like to call it parenting your parent, because it doesn't come off the tongue as easy, and it's not exactly accurate, but you're in that caregiver role where you're the responsibility. And so a lot of our caregivers, like you said, are in the sandwich generation. They're doing it on both ends. They're doing that with their parents and their children, and they're trying to manage their own lives. And I think that one of the strategies I talk most about to this sandwich generation is learning how to batch things, learning how to figure out what needs to be done, and instead of wasting time doing it 6 times a week, figure out how to batch it, such as grocery shopping, right? A lot of these people are grocery shopping for themselves, they're grocery shopping for their loved ones, they're doing it 3-4 times a week, and really getting into a headspace of how do I take a little bit of extra time now, make a schedule, make it into a habit, and get things done more concretely. We do it with our work as well, and people are used to doing that. But in family and at home, people are not as used to using the same strategies as we do in business. And then the other part really about balancing them is keeping those lines of conversation open, start the conversations early and regular. Right now, I'm fortunate my parents are only in their early 70s, and so we have lots of time, hopefully, to have these conversations, but starting them early so that they're not caught off guard when the conversations get a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, difficult but essential conversation. When we come back, I'm going to be talking to you about something we see quite often, and that's guilt and burnout. So crucial, and how do we deal with that? And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. Matt Delvecchio here, and I'm talking to Amy Friesen, author of Breadcrumbs, From Home Care to Care Homes, a family's guide through the elder care journey. Now, Amy, just before traffic, a topic that we both see, and a very difficult one, is when you're dealing with guilt and burnout, especially for caregivers. Not an easy job. So what advice can you give to caregivers to deal with all this guilt and burnout?
Oh, Matt, as a people pleaser in recovery, I have a lot of experience with guilt, I have to say, and probably most of our generation does. I would say, and what I tell caregivers all the time, is learn to dance with guilt. It's going to be there whether you do something or you don't do something, right? If you take your loved one's opinion and say, okay, you're safe at home, there's going to be guilt. Oh, are they safe? Have I set up enough things? Or if you don't take their opinion and you said, let's, set up a residence for your mom, I think it'll be better. And then they move in and there's guilt. Well, maybe I should have left them at home. Maybe they knew everything that they needed to be there, and different things like that. And it's always going to be there. So the best you can do is learn to dance with it and just take it into your kind of everyday emotions, because no matter what you do, it's on both sides. So, and then burnout, I think, also comes from that. Burnout comes from a lot of different things, but when you're constantly trying to please people and you're constantly trying to hold everything and do everything, you get exhausted. You're fatigued from that. And so for burnout, it's really important to listen to your own intuition. And a lot of people haven't honed their intuition because they, stuff it down and they try not to listen to it, which is something I tried in my early life. And I've learned to kind of understand what that means. And your body will tell you. And really up to, yourself to make sure that you're taking those breaks and listening to what your body is needing. And I think that just kind of being intuitive and listening in general to both what your body needs and how you're reacting to those guilt scenarios, I think that people will get a little bit further.
So much of this, the burnout and the guilt, might at the heart of it have to do with even having resistant family members to have these essential and difficult conversations. If you haven't had these conversations, it makes the guilt and burnout even more pronounced. So what are some of the effective ways, Amy, that you can initiate some of these elder care discussions with resistant family members?
For sure. Well, one of the things to do is wonder and be inquisitive as to why. Why are they being resistant? Why is this so difficult? And I think a lot of that comes down to the frame of reference. Where is your loved one coming from? What life experiences have they had that may not result in the decisions you want from today? Maybe it's, fears about money. Maybe it's fears about, old style nursing homes or fears about talking about mental health. And so I think it's really important that you take a minute before these conversations to be inquisitive as to where your loved one may be coming from. But short of that, generally speaking, letting your loved one know that these conversations are super awkward for you too. No one wants to have these conversations. And our sandwich generation folks are probably having awkward conversations on both sides. They're probably having elder care conversations, or at least the start of, and it could be in the birds and the bees at the same time with their kids. So consider, we've got a lot going on in this sandwich generation. So kind of applies to both. It's awkward. Say it straight out. This is awkward for me. Let's have a conversation. So, it lightens both of our loads. And it's really also important to not spring these types of conversations on people. No one wants to be at a family dinner and all of a sudden it's like, hey, Mom, let's talk about retirement living and how I should put you in a home. Like, you have to be delicate. You have to not assume that you already know the answer and be open to the conversation. And then it's also really important to set a time and a place and an intent. Mom, I was really worried about thinking about you using the stairs in the house. Can I come over Monday at lunch? I'll bring lunch. Can we just have a conversation about this? This way, you're not only not springing on someone, but you're also giving them, the topic of conversation and letting them form their own opinions around it so they can actually be a part of that conversation and it's not one-sided. And generally that kind of helps to open up those lines of communication.
Talking with Amy Friesen here on Life Unrehearsed about the challenges of navigating the aging process. Now, Amy, very quickly, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about retirement living and how can they be addressed? This is something that you and I both see in our world. So let's address that.
Sure. I think the main one that I see is retirement homes equal nursing homes, which is an old, saying for long-term care. And it's just not that, right? Retirement homes are more of a social model and long-term care is more of a medical model. And there's completely different things in each. And I think it's really important to understand that when someone says, let's look at assisted living or let's look at long-term care, people are generally putting it into a bucket, but then it's up to the families and the professionals to sort that out for what they actually need. And often it's not even what people call a nursing home. Often it's in retirement living or a little bit of home care or whatnot. So really understanding that they're just not the same thing. And the other thing that comes up a lot is that people feel like they have to be really old, really sick to come into retirement living. And that's just not true either, right? Well, as you know, Matt, retirement living, there's all sorts of it, but some of it's really geared to independent clientele who want to still be independent, who sometimes still work and they just want to enjoy people around and the socialization and not being isolated. So there's a little bit of, there's something for everyone really in retirement living. And I think it's really important to kind of put those misconceptions out to address them so people are all on the same page.
I'm glad you brought that up. There is a stigma once you hear the word residence even, and a lot of people shouldn't even be using that word. But you're right. You and I have walked in the hallways of hundreds of these retirement living homes, and some of them are very special and a nice quality of life. Amy, we are already out of time. I want to really thank you. Great words of advice, and a wonderful book, by the way. How can our listeners purchase your book?
Oh, that would be great, Matt. You can head over to teaandtoast.ca/breadcrumbs, and all the information's there, and you can purchase it through Amazon through that.
All right, Amy, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right, that's Amy Friesen, owner of Tea and Toast in Ottawa and best-selling author of Breadcrumbs, From Home Care to Care Homes, a Family's Guide Through the Eldercare Journey.